Audacity recording.
And I've started my recording.
Looks like my recording is recording. Audacity records just my voice.
I feel like I need to yell at my computer. I need a setup like you, Russ. I need to get a podcast mic. Anyway, that's a problem for another day. Yes. Okay. Jump straight in.
You're quite sound. Your sound is very good today. So.
Okay, good. I'm trying to talk louder.
I don't think you have to talk louder. That's what I'm telling you. I think you can talk sort of normal, and we'll be fine.
Okay, fabulous.
Last week, I think you were in a sort of a bigger room with fewer couches or whatever in it, and so there was a little echoey thing. But
yeah,
doesn't seem to be the case today.
No, and there's less renovation going on above my apartment, so
that's always a good thing.
Okay.
So Julian was asking you what sampling was like, and you started to say, but I cut you off. But now I'll uncut you. And
yeah, okay. So I did it yesterday, and I was about to give like some context, but do you want me to not even do that?
Yeah, I'd say we should go for the beeps. If the context seems relevant, I'm happy to hear the context. But
no. Yeah, you go, Julian.
I was also interested in your response to reading all the back and forths about the annotations on the interviews, and if that was weird or distracting for you.
Yeah, I remember I said to you guys earlier that I had worried that it would be, I guess, more distracting to read too much of that. But actually, I found it super interesting and almost, I hope, beneficial in the sense that I found it, I don't know how to explain how I found it beneficial, but in the way of like it sort of helped me further understand or be aware of the language that I was using, and then I guess read your reactions or you trying to understand what I'm trying to articulate, so I could kind of see times where I felt like I was really hitting the nail on the head in expressing that, I guess. So it wasn't like swaying me of like, oh, they like this or anything. It was more like, oh, I think they get that bit. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I guess, that makes sense. Although you don't need to use the perfect words, as Russ keeps saying.
No, I know, but
it's kind of us to argue about how we write these descriptions.
Yeah, that was quite interesting to read as well. No, but it was not about the perfect words. It was more just about, I don't know, there's something like, not necessarily comforting, but like interesting and enriching and maybe enlightening about times where I felt like that whatever I was trying to convey, I felt like I did convey, if that makes sense. So not even necessarily about specific language, but just like there were times when I'm reading it or certain beeps where I'm like, oh, I feel like we got something there. That's all. So yeah, I think it was beneficial to read, but yeah, it is a bit weird getting to that like meta level of reading about you commenting on my, like, yeah, it's quite weird.
Well, I have some, excuse me. I have some comments about that. Because I used to be more concerned about that, and I think I've been concerned about it back in the day when I was concerned about it, because the rest of science says, you have to have an objective procedure, and everything has to be exactly the same all the time, and we wouldn't want to corrupt our witnesses or whatever. But I think that's entirely wrong. I think it's, I think instead, what the object of science ought to be would be something like to be genuinely, transparently honest with our participant. And I think the comments that you saw going back and forth between Julian and me are trying to be genuinely honest with each other about what we thought and what we saw and what we didn't see and what we and so from my point of view, that's a good thing. To the extent that you're interested in it, it's not a good thing in the sense that I would insist that we make all the Mels of the world read these things while we're doing it. I wouldn't do that. But to the extent that she's interested, I think I think our aim is to be transparent and honest, and if the written word helps that, great.
Hmm.
And if it's disconcerting, then we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think it hindered, so I think that's cool. Because I had concerns that it would, but I definitely don't think it did. So anyway, but the only other slight context I was going to add about this week was just that I felt like I was a little out of practice. So because it had been a week that we missed, like I felt like initially I was sort of waiting for the beep again, and then one of the beeps I sort of said like, I'm not sure that I can be confident about what I think there. So I think I was just like a bit out of practice with it all again. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I would say to that, good. I'm glad that you're out of practice, because the more fresh eyes, fresh ears, or whatever that you can have towards the process, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So we can wipe clean what we've done before and come back and do it again, and then wipe clean what we've done before and come back and do it again. That's even better, which is also backwards from the most scientific procedures. Most scientific procedures want to go back and say, well, where we left off last time was.
Mm.
Well, I think that's entirely misguided.
Interesting.
I think the object of getting towards Mel's genuine experience requires or encourages us to start fresh, and that's a little bit disconcerting or whatever. That's the price that you pay for it.
Yeah, that is interesting, and it's a bit against what you've written in your books and papers, Russ, which is more about DES as training for the next day. And I guess it is training, but also training in a process, but also to forget, what came before. It's quite interesting. So I think there's something to explore. But
so I expect it is different from what I've written in my books before. And if you would, and it would be a service to me if you would tell me exactly where I'm contradicting myself, because in my recollection, I've always written exactly what I'm saying right now, and I know that that's not true, because I can go back occasionally and read it, but I don't feel in myself a transition. It seems like this is the way it's always been.
I don't think it's a contradiction, but like a different emphasis. But yeah, I could later go brush up on that. But I sort of get into the beeps for now.
Okay.
Okay.
And our Julian, are we going to alternate back and forth? You first, me second?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can start.
Okay, so I did these yesterday afternoon. So the first beep went off at 3:20 p.m. And I was looking at movie times on my phone. I was really honed in on considering going to see Killers of a Flower Moon. And I was very much focused on that singular idea. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about my inner experience in the sense that it was singular. It was somewhat autopilot, though not quite. There was contemplation present, considering whether to see the film. But in the sense of sitting with that idea, I wasn't discussing it with myself. I wasn't visualizing the cinema. I was just laying on my couch, mulling over going to see a movie.
All right. So Killers of this new Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower, what's it called again?
Killers of a Flower Moon.
Killers of a Flower Moon. So you're sitting on your couch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You were looking at your phone, and you were considering whether to see this movie. Mm-hmm. And it was somewhat on autopilot, but not fully. So there was still this considering aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I want to find out is what this is between like full autopilot and in this considering aspect. Is there a way for you to describe it further, or you don't know?
I do know, but trying to describe this is the really tricky bit, and because I feel like this is a perfect example of what thought process often feels like to me, because as I mentioned, like there was a contemplation, but what that looks like is kind of challenging to describe, because in a way it's easier for me to describe what it isn't. So it isn't a discussion happening with myself inside my brain. It isn't me visualizing me going to the cinema later. It's not that, but there is a concept that I am like mulling over inside my brain, and it almost feels like a presence, and kind of like a, not even so much like a feeling. I keep coming back to the phrase like concept. So it's just, and like I said, I think last week about like a knowing, it's like that, but it's not, doesn't have any like color or shape or language per se.
Mm-hmm. So no language, no visual imagery of you in a theater, no feeling, you said, or you said it's not quite a feeling, is it?
It's not quite a feeling.
So there is something there. Is there clear content, or no, or you don't know?
On this occasion there was, and in fact, yeah, sorry, I was about to add a lot of context. Stick to this beep. Yes, it was really singular. It was, when the beep went off, I was absolutely, definitely 100% focusing on the singular thought of, should I go see this movie this afternoon? Like that was crystal clear. There was no, it was such a singular thought that I was consumed by.
And when you say, should I go see the movie this afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it was that exact content? Or would you say maybe it was, should I see the movie? Or maybe it was, it could be good to see the movie. Or like, was it, what I'm asking, was it that exact content, or maybe something slightly different, or you don't know, or?
I feel like it was that. I was looking, so like, yeah, for context that I do feel is relevant to this beat, like I was looking at the exact like movie times on that afternoon. So the beat went off and I was physically looking at the times that were options for this afternoon. So I feel like when it went off, my brain was thinking, should I go see this film this afternoon? It was, yeah, it was quite tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Again, this is not autopilot. This was different. There was a contemplation about this.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, I guess what I want to know is like how exact or how literally it was that content. Could it have been something like, should I see that film later, for example? Or does that distinction not?
No, it wasn't later. It wasn't, should I see this movie in general? It wasn't, should I go see it later in the week? It was really specifically, my thought was, should I go see this afternoon? And it went off at the exact time that I was trying to like decide the answer to that, I guess. It wasn't, should I see it at 1:00 or should I see it at 6:00? It was, my brain was about to answer, was about to answer, should I go see this movie this afternoon? I didn't go see it, but that's the exact, I got cut off right in that moment.
But you were considering mulling.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's clear content.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the clear content. Should I go see this movie this afternoon?
So can I ask a question, insert a question in there, because I think it might be helpful to be a little clearer about the content. Is it, should I go see the movie, or is it about this afternoon?
Well, it's both. Yeah. Should I go see it this afternoon specifically? Yeah.
But specifically about this afternoon. This is not a debate about whether I should see this movie or not.
Yeah.
It's a debate about this afternoon.
Yeah.
And so the content of this thinking, which is not clear how it is presented to you, or this experience, but it is clear about which aspect is present to you. It's the this afternoon aspect, not the should I see the movie aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So there's that content. Is there anything else experientially that makes it, we call like this considering or mulling over or whatever aspect?
No, I would like to have more language for you, but I've tried to be aware of whether, there was anything like particularly physical about it, or, whether there was anything I was noticing or feeling, but truly there was not. It was just this tunnel vision of that thought. And I'm trying to think of like how else I can describe that knowing, because it's such a challenge, because I know what I'm talking about. I can feel it. I know when I'm thinking that, but to describe that is so hard because it sort of evades like terminology.
Yeah. And before you said somewhat autopilot, but then you described this content that you were confident of and that was clear. I'm curious why it might still be somewhat autopilot, or maybe you don't have to stick with how you described it before.
No, I feel like that link is a little helpful for me, because I guess the comparison I'm drawing there is in the singularity, perhaps, and the sort of ease with which something is happening inside me. So like, if we go back to the vacuuming example or whatever, that where I describe that as like peak autopilot, and it's really sort of dormant inside me. This has sort of like the same sort of singularity. However, the key difference is that it's focused on a thought rather than me necessarily doing something physical or just doing an action. Like what I was consumed singularly doing was contemplating something. And I think that's the key difference. But there feels like there is some synergy there.
Okay. So before the vacuuming was kind of an action you were doing and it wasn't so much experientially present. Could it be possible, and say no if you want, but that this thought was just something that was happening and wasn't so experientially present?
A little, but no, I know what you mean, because I've felt that before, and I think this was more thought than that gives it credit for. Okay. This wasn't me literally like clicking on 3:20 this afternoon and going through the process of buying ticket. This was a step before that where I was in a decision-making sort of spot.
Okay. And just another question. So your eyes were physically on the screen as a fact of reality. Was that at all in your experience?
No, because I feel like it wasn't super relevant. Like definitely that's where my eyes were looking, but I wasn't necessarily focused on the screen at that point.
Okay. Then I'm all good for questioning.
So I had a couple of follow-up questions about what I asked earlier. So, excuse me, it's still early in the morning here. So this is a pretty clearly available to me pondering about this morning or this afternoon, but it's about this afternoon. And is it specifically about the possible times this afternoon? Could be 1:20 or 5:11 or whatever. Or is this just, should I narrow myself down to somewhere this afternoon?
Yeah, I think the latter. Just in general, should I do this afternoon at some point?
Okay. Yeah. So what I've got from the whole conversation is basically I'm laying on my couch, it doesn't much matter. I'm looking at my phone, that doesn't much matter. But what's in my experience is some sort of contemplation / mulling / thinking / some word that we don't really have maybe a good one for
Mm-hmm.
about whether I should see this movie this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's basically it.
Yeah.
That's what I have as well. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Number 2.
So second one went off a long time later, 4:20. And I've written, this was really empty, definite autopilot. I was sitting at my desk and I was halfway through filling in my details on the New York Gov website. No thoughts, no clear perceptions. I was just sort of doing A to B.
And the doing A to B was typing name and identification information or whatever into the website?
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. I was applying for a New York residency card.
And I'm gathering that was coming out of your fingers into your eyes and out of your fingers without your meddling with it or something. It was
pretty much like there wasn't any, like there was no, in comparison to the beat prior to this, there was no contemplation. There was no, it was just A to B, sort of like, as soon as I read whatever it was asking me to fill in, that was going in. So I think I was quite literally I wasn't quite typing yet, but I just sort of read whatever the next, prompt was that I was about to fill in when the beep went off. But there was no contemplation, I think, is the important difference between the two sort of beeps.
So no contemplation, no recognition at all? And is it the case that I am processing this question entirely outside of my awareness? I don't understand it. Obviously, I understand it because I'm about to type a skillful respond to it. So I'm not questioning that. The question is, in my experience, is there anything, or is there? This is my brain, body, whatever, processing this stuff skillfully without any recognition on my own at all.
I sort of feel like the latter. Yeah, like it didn't feel like my brain was having to be active. Not that somehow I think that my physical body can just answer the questions without my brain having to do anything. But that's sort of what it felt like. I didn't read it and think, oh yeah, what's my name? Like, it was all quite, like how I've written there, sort of doing A to B. That when the beep went off, my inner experience wasn't mulling over, like the response, the questions perhaps are so straightforward that there wasn't any thing.
And I want to be as clear as we can be about the difference between sort of a meta analysis of this project and just no experience of it at all. So, for example, when you talk, you were waving your hands and going like this, whatever. I'm guessing that you had no recognition of that at all. It was skillfully coming out of you and, modulating or responding or whatever to it, but without any
awareness
at all, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And the question is that the way this form reading was happening? It was coming out of me. It was skillful. I'm conveying something, but most of the time it's those gestures are outside of my awareness, and I want to know whether this reading, answering process seemed entirely outside of your awareness, like a hand gesture might be.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, then I'm good.
Was anything in your awareness at all, or on the days before,
mm-hmm.
we had some nothing samples. Mm-hmm. Was this a nothing, or is this a little tiny bit of something?
I can't remember well enough, but I think a nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, like the first thing that I wrote down here is, this was really empty, definite autopilot. So I'd suggest that that's like nothing.
Okay, then I'm good as well.
Number 3.
Number 3.
This went off pretty soon after 4:35, so I've written similar to above. I was filling in another form online, and I was just reading the screen. So all the, like, there's, to me, there's absolutely no difference in those 2 beeps.
Absolutely no difference.
No.
Okay.
I was still doing a task that was outside of my awareness.
Okay. So here you would also say nothing in experience?
Yeah, and autopilot and all that sort of language.
Okay. You're reading the screen. Beep number 2, this is just a question about context. You were reading the screen or typing something in at that time for the previous one? Beep number 2, the one we did right before.
Yeah, I haven't written it down, but I remember this, and I think, yeah, I wasn't typing. I was about to type. So, yeah, I was just finishing the end of reading a prompt.
Okay, that one was also reading. So no experiential differences.
Mm-mm.
And you seem confident about that, so I don't have any more questions on this.
Yeah.
So I'm debating here about whether I should make a meta comment or ask a question. So what I'll make the meta comment. So when a DES participant says this is like that, my general procedure is to say, well, it might be like that, but let's start at the beginning. And this is sort of what I was saying at the beginning of the conversation today, that what that does is that gives another chance, sort of, well, let's wipe clean and ask the same kinds of questions again. But they won't be exactly the same kind of questions. In this case, it would have been because Julian was asking it instead of me. And it could be that when we get to the end, we would have said, well, that was just exactly like before. But now, instead of just being, well, Mel said it was exactly like before, so we don't have anything to say. Now it would be, well, we've asked the same kinds of questions. We've asked similar questions. And we have come to the conclusion that it's the same as before. So I think there is warrant to ask a question, ask a series of questions again. I think we probably muddied the water enough at this one that we probably shouldn't ask the questions again. But
I was thinking the same, that I would want to ask a little bit more. I think I did ask one other question, but yeah, that wasn't a serious inquiry. But maybe we should. Do you want to?
Can I give you a comment on the back of that, or ask a question on the back of that? And you can say, like, it's not relevant and I don't want to tell you. But that stresses me out a little bit, because I start to really worry about my memory being accurate enough for that. So when it gets to a level that is really beyond the, 3 lines that I've written down, in terms of like that level of inquiry, I really worry. Like, I can't sit here and transport myself back to that exact moment experientially and really be like, oh yeah, I definitely remember how that looked and felt. I can't do that. So when you're suggesting that you want to ask that level of questioning, I get really worried about how authentically and honestly I could answer that.
So this is the kind of commenting that makes it a good deal for us to have gone back and done it again. Because if we had gone back and done it again, then Mel would have said the kinds of things that she's saying now, which is to say, you guys are stressing me out by pushing me harder than I can push. And that is a valuable piece of information that goes beyond, well, this was exactly like the other.
Yeah.
What she's saying now is, well, there's a limit as to what I can remember. And as far as I can say, well, this was like that other, but I can't say it was exactly like the other. It was because there's a limit to my memory. Mm-hmm. And that is a valuable part of the process, as it seems to me, because it's different from, well, this was exactly like the other one.
do other people, and I know you're going to want to say it doesn't matter what other people think, but I don't care, I'm going to ask you anyway, but do other people suggest that same sort of thing, or is that different?
And by the same sort of thing, you mean this is like that other beep?
No, of the like, I can't remember to that level.
Yes, I've written a paper about the limit, or several papers probably, about the limits of what people can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular one is the paper that I was thinking about. Is I've written a paper called, I don't remember what it's called, little or nothing, or something like that. Because the philosophers, some philosophers, want to take me to task when I say, well, there's little or no, and they want to know, well, do you mean a little or do you mean no?
Yeah.
And I want to say, that when you get down far enough into the weeds, you can't distinguish between little or no. And if you think you can, then you're probably mistaken. So I have that kind of a conversation fairly frequently with people. That so when you're saying there's absolutely nothing in my experience, when you said that in response to beep number 2, I heard that as, well, she's gone down as far as she can get. She's probably not going to be able to do much better than that.
Mm-hmm. But so that's a shared response from people generally, that like they find the limit of their memory in terms of being able to kind of go back to that moment? Or is that really different for people? You can tell me, shut up.
Well, there's wide differences in how careful people are. Mm-hmm. And there are also big differences in where the edges of their experience abilities, their ability to describe their experience is. So your particular difficulty that we've discovered so far is sort of between little and nothing. But other people whose experiences say somewhat more directly present to them. Like I have a visual image, and I was seeing a fighter jet plane, and I can ask, well, there's a fighter plane jet going straight or bank to the left or bank to the right or whatever, and they would say, well, I'm not really sure about that. I could see a fighter jet, and I couldn't tell you exactly where. So they get to limits, but it's a different kind of
limit. Interesting. That's limit.
Really. But that's the. Some people would say, well, if you can't tell whether the fighter jet is going to the left or going to the right, then you can't say you had an image of a fighter jet. Well, I think that's totally wacky. Yeah. I think, I can in the real world, I saw the fighter jet, and if you ask me whether it was bank to the left or bank to the right, I would probably say, no, I'm not really sure, because that's the way perception is. We don't see things exactly the way they are. We see things as we understand them, and we don't remember. We remember them according to our concepts and whatever. So,
that's really interesting and helpful. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so that's just what I want to note there. That definitely, yes, you've hit the nail on the head of the limit of my memory, or yeah, it's a recall thing, I feel like, here, but exactly of trying to hone in further on that level of like autopilot. Was there nothing like that? That's where the limit is for me. That's where I start to get less confident in my ability to answer that genuinely, authentically, honestly. Like I start to not trust the recall that I would have.
But I don't know is also as authentic a response as anything. So it's fine, guys. And I think another point that's interesting is you talked about the limits of your being able to go back and put yourself in that experience at that moment. And that's kind of not quite what DES is. It's not about like trying to go back and reconstruct it, because there are other similar methods. One of them is called the microphenomenological interview, that really try to put you back, and you try to go back and relive this experience. But I think that can change the experience when you relive it. And I guess DES, it's not just going back to that experience, but also going back to the moment after the beep, when you're taking notes and remembering that experience. And like, that's also part of what you're remembering now. Mm-hmm. So I think it's this kind of combination of the notes, the experience itself, the memory of the experience right after the beep. And if you say like, I can't go much beyond like the 3 things I wrote in my notes, mm-hmm. well, like that's the point of the notes, is for you to put down essential things that you think are important to tell us too. So mm-hmm. I think that's fine too. If you say, oh, I can't go much farther and much deeper, and I'm worried that I won't be telling you accurate things, yeah, that's fine to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me amplify that a little bit. The difference between going back, which microphenomenology does, and going forwards, which I think DES does, is about the way the iterative procedure works. So whenever the conversation that we're having right now is about, well, maybe there was nothing there, maybe there was something there. It seemed like there was pretty much nothing there. Mostly I'm going to say there's nothing there. That's sort of what we got today. And it might be, or one strategy would be, well, let's see whether we can get you to go back into that moment and relive that. I'm again it. I don't think that's a productive. Often it's not a productive way to do it, because for the reasons Julian said. But what I do think is, we've had a conversation about nothing and thinking and stuff. You've discovered that we are going to be accepting of you when you have difficulties here. And now next week when we sample, and when you, at the moment of the beep, when it happens, then you will have a chance to, armed by this conversation, to pay more attention to the best you can and tell us about it. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the faith of DES. The faith of DES is that we're not going to try to reconstruct something. Our object is to reconstruct as little as possible. Mm-hmm. Our object is to become better apprehenders and going forwards, so that then we don't have to reconstruct. We can. Mel will be in a position to say, well, this is as far as I could go, right immediately after the beep. And when she's thinking about it herself and writing down the notes that she's going to take, she's going to say, well, this is as far as I can go. I can't go any farther than that. I know they're going to be interested in that, but I can't go there, or whatever. However, she's going to process that with as little recollection as we can, or a little reconstruction as we can do.
Mm. I think I like that about this too, because that feels better to me than, I don't have the capacity to reconstruct or whatever. So yeah, all I can do is do exactly that and write down everything that I think at the time. Because then basically now all I can do is trust my notes and stuff. I don't have the capacity to, in a helpful way, take myself back to a moment, and I can't do that. Maybe some people can, but I can't. So this process is better.
And I don't want to be in a position of saying that going back to the details is not a good idea. I think there might very well be times when going back is an excellent strategy, but it runs the risk of reconstruction bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel that. Anyway, sorry, I went on a tangent.
So on to number 4.
Wait, did we want to ask any more content questions about this, Russ, after being in the meta realm for a while?
I think we've probably muddied the water adequately.
Okay.
So let's go into number 4.
This is yours again, Russ.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of similar. This beep went off not that long after, 4:43. And I wrote, same, I'm still at the computer. I'm now looking at my bank website, and there's absolutely nothing of note going on inside my brain. It's almost as if my body is present and I'm conducting physical actions without my brain needing to do anything, almost as though my inner experience is sort of sleeping.
So what do you, when you say my brain, do you mean anything other than my experience?
No, I think that's just the shorthand way that I like to describe my inner experience.
Okay. So some people, when they say it's going on in my brain or whatever, they mean I feel it up here.
No, I think when I say my brain, I just mean internally.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean just the whole thing, I would say.
Okay. And so I'm not 100% sure I've got the whole picture here, but so what I've got is I'm looking at my bank statement.
Online, on the computer.
Okay. And there's nothing in my experience? Is that the...
Yeah. I would say that this is similar to the one before of like A to B, separate to my awareness. But this time when the beep went off, I felt like I wasn't startled by it or anything. So I felt like I could capture that. Not only was I just doing an A to B and this was separate to sort of my awareness, but that in a meta way, in me trying to be aware of my awareness, my takeaway from that was that it sort of was, though it was like a sleep, if that makes any sense. So like my in the same way that like there's sort of nothing going on and it's sort of this autopilot, this time I felt like a really apt description for that was that internally it was like sleeping.
And do you mean to say that this experience was like the other one and we could have called it sleeping, we could have called it autopilot, and maybe sleeping is a better word or whatever? Or do you mean that there's something that's different about this one that I would call this one sleeping and I would call that one autopilot?
I think maybe there's a slight difference.
And what would that difference be? And I don't worry about the words, but what's the difference between this one and that one?
Yeah, so I feel like it's subtle, but I feel like the autopilot, I'm still kind of present within the room, and even though the like, you know, action of vacuuming or whatever is happening, and I'm like, whatever, I'm still sort of present. Whereas when I felt the need to describe this as like sleeping, felt like I was like absolutely shut off internally. Like there was nothing, but in a way of like, I think it felt different to, I don't know, like it felt like a restful state.
So is this like a nothing or nothing than some of the previous beeps?
That's what I was just trying to think. Hang on, let me think. I'm not sure. Maybe.
So I would say let's not fret too hard about it, because this is the kind of thing that I would try. I would trust the iterative procedure to either reveal it down the road or not.
Yeah.
Because what this beep is confounded by the fact that you now have some more experience under your belt as far as how to do this stuff at the same time as you're doing this stuff. So it could be that you're just better at noticing that there's nothing going on, and it's not really more nothing. It's just that I'm more happy to notice nothing. Or it could be that there are some differences between this kind of nothing and that kind of nothing.
Yeah, I feel like all of that is true. I don't know which of that it is, whether it's just that I'm better at noticing and describing the nothing, or whether it's a slight difference in the nothing. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, and I'm happy with that. That's the way this process works. And it could very well be that we're never going to be able to make that distinction, or maybe we will. I would be happy with either one. But what I would point out is that the distinction that we're having difficulty making is a pretty fine distinction, whether it's nothing or nothing squared, or something like that. I mean, those are pretty much the same thing, not exactly the same thing, but and that. I think we've said along the line of DES is not about perfection. It's about let's do this stuff as good as we can do it.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair comment to make about whether it's just that I'm a little bit better at noticing or trying to describe it in a new, different way or whatever, or whether it was slightly different. I'm not sure. I think that's cool.
I think that's right. And I think we take that seriously, and not too many other people do. And but that's what makes life interesting, because we're going to try to figure out what Mel's experience is like after we have maybe figured out how to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think leaving it to the iterative approach is good, and other days we might get closer. But I had one question, like knowing that we might not get an answer, and then it might not be clear. So you compared this to some autopilot ones, which were a little bit more something. Maybe there was something more of the process, writing email or vacuuming or whatever in your experience. And this one was more nothing, but from your descriptions, it still seemed it was more something than some moments you've described as no experience, nothing, or dormant. So that's the way I was, like I was going to try to clarify it. Does that description make any sense to you, or is it completely off the mark?
It does. And I'm trying to decide if it's a apt description. I think it's we're in that really fine, like in the weeds here, where I'm not super sure. Because I've written as though my inner experience is asleep, and I definitely felt that. But whether that is a distinction with like when I've described like nothing experientially, I'm not sure. I need to.
Yeah. It might also have been just me misunderstanding it, because
I think it's a really fair question. Like, is there a difference? Don't know.
Because I might have latched onto words like restful and was thinking, some kind of feeling of rest, which to me is a little bit of a something, but that might just be me,
No, I think that's a fair statement. I actually agree with that. Yeah. There was a restful element to this that perhaps then is a factor in making it more than nothing, because that is definitely something that I've noted and felt. And so whether that is a slight difference in some way,
I'm curious about this element, and I realize I might be biasing you by bringing up this word again and hanging too much on the word restful. But is there anything else you could say to describe that aspect if it's there?
Not
Okay.
no, because I won't remember well enough, but I'm going over my notes again. Absolutely nothing of note going on inside my brain, almost as if my body is present and I'm conducting physical actions without my brain needing to do anything. So that feels very similar to the autopilot stuff that I've described previously.
Yeah.
But then I've added almost as though my inner experience is asleep. So I would say, to wrap this up, this is going back to what Russ and I were just talking about before about, is that just me sort of finding another way to describe that same thing, or is this slightly different? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't think I brought much clarity with my questioning, but I was curious. I wanted to try to probe a little bit, even though we might not get anything certain.
No, I appreciate that.
So can I ask one more different line of questioning about this? So I'm looking at my bank statement online, and is it your sense that I got out of looking at the bank statement what I intended to get out of it? I wanted to find out my balance, and I found it out, or I wanted to figure out when I had paid this last, and I found it out, or whatever. Or does it seem like I am just sort of glazed over? And so what I want to know is, as best you can say, were you skillfully interacting with your bank statement while there was nothing going on in your experience? Or were you just sort of totally asleep with my eyes aimed at the bank statement?
I think it was that, because I was was like I think like I just opened the bank statement or something. So, it's not like I was in the depths of reading and understanding any sort of like particular details yet. So then it might have been different. But at the exact time the beep went off, I would say it's that glazed over thing where I was just doing something and it was beyond my consciousness in a sense.
So that makes this beep different from, I guess maybe it was the first beep where we were filling out a New York form,
Mm-hmm.
where in that filling out, I was skillfully filling it out,
Mm-hmm.
even though there was sort of nothing in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was
Whereas
doing
this.
Yeah.
But that was reading it, like having just finished reading before you were about to fill it out, right?
Yeah, so there were a couple, but yeah. Say the second beep was, I was just about to fill in my details. So I'm trying not to provide too much, like to read too much into things, but I think that the thing I want to say is I think it's relevant that in that one, there was an A to B to do. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Of like, I just finished reading a thing and my brain was about to do a thing. So that's sort of the process that I think I describe as autopilot, where there is a physical action or a skill or a task to sort of do, and I'm in the middle of doing that, and I'm not really thinking about what's required to do that. The difference in this beep with the bank statement is I don't think that I was in the middle of doing a thing yet. Like I'd sort of just opened a bank statement and I wasn't like looking for a certain part of it yet or whatever. I was just, I wasn't in the middle of a process or a skillful action. I was glazed over and my brain was kind of asleep because nothing was really required from it at that exact moment. If that makes any sense.
So I got a couple of things to say. One is, Julian, I think she did say that she was in the middle of having read it and was about to respond or something along the line, but I would not take her too seriously about that. I think if you go back, you'll find that she hedged that pretty successfully. And so she was saying, I don't really know what was going on. I was going from A to B, and somewhere between A and B, I was probably this, not that, but I'm not really sure.
Okay.
And so you don't want to clean her up beyond what she's capable of saying, which I think you're.
Okay, because I remember trying to figure out before if the actual typing was ongoing at the moment or not. But it's true.
Yeah, but you got to give her. She's saying she's not paying attention to that stuff.
Okay. Okay.
And then but then the other thing is that. So there is sort of a big difference between being glazed over in a sleep. So there's nothing happening. I'm just shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, I'm not shut down. I'm processing the New York application, even though I'm not thinking directly about it. It's my brain cells are processing it. My finger cells are processing it. My eyeballs are processing it. All that stuff is going on, even though I don't have a apprehension of it in before the footlights of consciousness. Or I've just shut everything down. I'm asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, even while you're asleep, there's some processing going. You don't fall out of bed very often. We know where the edge of the bed is, and
Yeah.
So,
I think there's a distinction again, and it's really fine. But yeah, in talking about it more, there's a distinction. But it's fine.
And this conversation that I'm having right now is more about tomorrow than it is about today or yesterday. I'm interested in whether you have a lot of skillful processing going on without any direct apprehension, or whether at times you just shut yourself down and take a little break and then turn all the skillful stuff back on again. micro sleep.
Yeah,
or something.
that's really interesting.
And maybe we'll figure that out. Maybe we won't.
But to me, this questioning is a bit risky because I feel like you still made some experiential assumptions. Like before, you were talking about processing, and the neurons are doing this, and the fingers are doing that. But there might not be any experiential difference between that and nothing. I mean, in some samples of Mel. So I don't know. There's just a couple things about this, the way it was phrased, where I feel like it might not bring clarity.
The objective wasn't to bring clarity.
Just to muddy the waters.
The object was to be unclear, so that on the possibility that there's some distinctions in here, even though I don't know what they are, Mel might in the future be able to help us out.
But to me, even for iterative training, it might be like, oh, well, I was skillfully doing this task and I was more engaged. So maybe my brain was on autopilot and there was some minimal like experience for this task. But that might not be true. Like we've seen some samples where you're doing some things, Mel, where like maybe lots of people would be thinking lots of things and have a lot of things going on, but you were also clear that it was nothing. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if that iterative training is helpful.
I think to me, this conversation has been helpful in the sense that now, next time I did samples, I would like, I think it's helpful knowledge to try and notice like, oh, okay, is there a difference? It feels like a helpful discussion to have to fine tune my description of nothing or autopilot or whatever, in the sense of like just encouraging me to notice if there is a difference between those things. Like I found this conversation helpful.
Okay, then that's good. And but Russ, go ahead.
I guess we will see whether the conversation was helpful or not. That's the...
Yeah.
Should we do beep number 5?
Well, we're at an hour.
We're at an hour? Well, we had some small talk. But what do you think, Mel? One more beep, or are you good?
Let me see what the beep... I mean, I've written that it's very similar, so I don't know that you'll get much from it, but we can do it if you want to.
I find it interesting. Russ, do you have the time and stamina for one more?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, well, I've written, so this only went off 7 minutes later, which I always I do find the times really relevant for whatever reason. Anyway, so this went off at 4:50, and I've written, same as above, I was physically shuffling through some mail without much intention. And that's all I wrote. So I put this in the category of that sort of autopilot, in the sense that I'm doing a physical task, but there's not a lot of conscious awareness to anything.
So not a lot of conscious awareness. You're going through physical mail or email?
Mail, yeah, right here. I was literally like in the process of doing that.
Okay, sifting through. Was it like, this might not have been experienced, but like physically, was it about reading who it's from? Was it about sorting it in some way? Was it, do you know?
Yeah, I think I kind of noticed like what each letter was. I didn't feel the need to write down anything about the physicality of the whole thing, though. Like, I didn't write down like, oh, and I was aware of how the mail felt or smelt or anything like that. Like, there was no desire to note anything like that. I find it interesting that I wrote I was shuffling through the mail without much intention, because I think that that's sort of relevant, and this is where it's somewhere between some previous beeps of that autopilot and, perhaps those moments where my brain is sort of shut off because it wasn't an A to B task. I'm saying I was shuffling through with no intention. I wasn't looking for a particular piece of mail, or I wasn't right in the moment of thinking I should open that piece of mail. That's not the moment the beep went off. The moment the beep went off was doing a physical act without any intention, without much without much awareness or whatever.
Yeah.
But I haven't described this as feeling like sleeping. It wasn't that. Yeah.
So in our gradations of not much to nothing, would you be able to put it on some level or not?
Yeah, I would say like vacuuming.
Okay, like vacuuming. So a bit more than nothing, if I understand right.
Yeah, exactly. If the full nothing now is sort of like the previous beep where we're saying that feels like sleeping and fully switched off, I'd say this feels like autopilot, where I'm doing something. There's no like contemplation, but it's not like fully asleep, and that is a fine distinction. And don't ask me to go any deeper than that.
Yeah. So a little bit of something going through the mail, and you said not much intention. Was there maybe a little bit intention, a little bit of like seeing what you got, or?
Well, I guess I was shifting through it for some reason, but I can't sifting through it for some reason, but I can't remember what it was, and I didn't note what it was.
Okay. So
when the beep went off, I wasn't looking for a particular thing. There wasn't, like if we go back to earlier, right? Say when I was thinking about whether to go see that movie in the afternoon, and that's a thought that I was sitting with and contemplating. There was none of that present in this. Okay. There was no contemplation about a thing.
Was the visual aspect in your awareness or not, or you don't know?
Yeah, I would say it was. I would say the visual aspect was. The tactile aspect, not so much, but the visual definitely. Yeah. This wasn't my eyes glazed over and my sort of consciousness asleep or whatever. I was visually taking in what I was looking at, but taking in to the level of autopilot.
And that's still different from physically you might be doing something skillfully, but it doesn't enter your experience. Like Russ mentioned before, you were moving your hands around, but not necessarily experienced. Could that be the same with the vision? You're skillfully looking at mail, but the visual part wasn't something directly entering your brain, your experience, whatever?
Maybe, yes. I feel like I was a bit more like visually aware of this than I am aware of when I'm waving my hands about. Like I have no awareness of doing that, whereas like there was an awareness of the visual here because that's part of what I was doing. But that's,
yeah.
But it's fine.
So my parents are I'm visiting my sister, so I'm in an Airbnb with my parents, and they're kind of walking around in the background. But they haven't been in this room till now. Anyways, yeah, the visual thing, it was something I mentioned, I brought up, you didn't bring it up, which is why I'm a bit more skeptical of it, because I introduced it. But you did say that it was in your awareness more. If it was there any particular aspect of that visual part in your awareness?
No, I just think in like an observational sense, like that I was aware of that, and it was important it was relevant to like whatever I was doing or taking in, or, to use the word processing, but, like in an observational sense, but nothing beyond that sort of level of awareness or whatever.
I'm good for questioning on this one.
Me too.
Hey, I asked all my questions.
Hold on, Julian.
Finally. All right. Well.
So we can do this again.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like everything that we did today was helpful in the sense that these discussions are helpful for me sometimes to prod about whether, just prod and probe about what I'm trying to articulate. Like I found this helpful today and feel like the next time I do this, that will all inform when I try and notice, if that makes sense.
Sounds good to me. Same time, same station next week.